Good morning. Welcome back to the Old Gravy podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Plaza Grande. If you're not 55, you will wish you were. We're podcasting today out of the Wavelength Studio here in beautiful Jupiter, Florida. I think we're going to have an interesting podcast. I'm going to let the President of the United States tell you what we're talking about.
China.
So I think I just covered what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about China, and I do find it interesting that more people are not thinking about China or talking about China. I mean, you hear it about trade and what's going on in the world with all the trade and the tariffs, and China obviously is a big part of that. But China is a serious rival to America's future. And I just wonder why there's not more conversations with common everyday people talking about China, because there is a risk for our children and for our grandchildren. And I don't know, I look at it in two ways. Is it because of political correctness? When we had COVID, we called everything, by a name where diseases originated from. There was the Hong Kong flu. There's a million names that are named after the regions that they came from. But they didn't want you calling it the Chinese virus, the Wuhan virus, which actually made the most sense. It was coming out of Wuhan. That's where the virus originated. And there was a lot of pressure on people by political leadership not to identify where the virus came from. So I'm wondering if that's a reason that people are afraid of looking some form of racism if they're actually kind of talking about China. Then you also have all these big business interests in America that also probably don't want you talking bad about China. And that's politicians, that's universities, that's Wall Street, that's every corporate America. They kind of have built a culture where there's no reason to talk about China. Now, I find it interesting when I was growing up, back in and I'm going to name decades, where from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even to the 90s, the average person was very concerned with the Soviet Union, very concerned with nuclear war, communism taking over the country. But everyday Americans, even little kids running around in the street, would be, people would say, better dead than red. Kind of like, we're never giving up America. But rarely do we hear people talk about China in the sense, and it's totally different than the Soviet Union, but it is communism. But we rarely hear the common culture talking about it. So today I have George Allgaier. He's my former college roommate and business partner of 20 years, and George is going to join me to talk about China. We were in business together for 20 years. I always joke the first 5 years were hard and the next 2 were worse. And I know you can appreciate that.
Yes.
So anyway, it's good to have you here to talk about China, George.
Great to be here, Old Gravy. Before we get into China, why don't you tell me about your radio career and how that's going?
You're interviewing me now.
Yes, I am. We turned it around.
Actually, I just filled in for Rich Zeoli on the Rich Zeoli show up in Philadelphia on 1210. I did the last hour for him. He's a busy guy. He had to head off to do the Laura Ingraham show. But I am did I tell you? I guess I didn't tell you. I'm doing the Monday Memorial Day show, the morning show, Kale and Company show. I'm doing that from 6 to 10 a.m.
That's great.
Thanks for the lead-in.
Great.
Are you going to be listening? Are you going to get up?
Of course I am.
It's a holiday weekend. I don't know if you will.
I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Okay. All right. So you're probably all thinking there, what do these two know about China? But what I find interesting is the so-called smart people and the experts, George, I don't know what they were thinking. So I know what we kind of know just from living life and having some basic instincts and asking some questions. But we're going to ask the questions of the instincts of the people, the politicians, corporate America, Wall Street. Why did they tie us so deep into China? Mm-hmm. Like, why did they do it? So I know I asked you to read a book about, it was the 5 things?
Seven.
Seven
Yep.
things you can't say about China. I thought that was a good book. And when I thought about inviting you on, I thought by reading that book, it kind of gives you the history of the relationship between the United States and China. It's weird that in 1990, we allowed China into the World Trade Organization, and George Bush Sr. was the one that signed off on that. And in 2000, Bill Clinton signed off on the most favored nation status. Mm-hmm. Now, we are giving a country which is a communist country, and in the show, I'm going to refer to the Chinese leadership as the Chi-Coms, Chinese communists. I think that's taken out a lot of the dialogue. When you talk about the relationship between China and America, no one wants to say, calling them Chi-Coms. I'm not calling every Chinese person over in China living their life doing I'm not calling them the Chi-Coms. I don't know if they're communists or not. Matter of fact, there are different sects in China, and we're going to get into that. And a lot of them are totally abused by the Chi-Coms, and the Chi-Coms are the Chinese leadership. And I guess here was the original thing. And I'll ask you the question, not to put you on the spot, but why do you think the elites, the political elites, the corporate elites, the Wall Street elites, why do you think they kind of turned over all our manufacturing to China? Then they gave them the passwords to all our intellectual property. Obviously, they stole it. They stole a lot of it. But when you build such a relationship and you invite them in, you're going to get you're going to get them stealing your passwords. Mm-hmm. You give them the keys to the factory floor and say, you're now our manufacturer. They take all that technology, all that know-how, how to build things. What when you read the book, or what your general opinion? What motivated them to do that?
I think the motivations may have changed from the beginning, right? I think that the motivations may have been, we can work with this society who's communist, and we can show them the way. We can show them how capitalism and democracy work together.
That's it.
And they'll want to change.
That they'll want to change because we will tie them in to the honeypot of America, and teach them all the lessons.
Right.
You know, it reminds me of George Bush invading Iraq, even Afghanistan to a certain extent. Like, you're going to turn all these cultures from centuries into Jeffersonian democracies. Mm-hmm. Same type of elite thinking.
Yeah.
And it doesn't ever seem to work out well. Like, it's like we're not thinking like Americans. You know what no, we're thinking like Americans, and we think everyone will think like Americans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that that was the main motivation that they would see that, and eventually the markets would be open up, and trade would flourish. But not only that they would accept democratic tenets.
Yeah, so that was the goal. Mm-hmm. But behind that goal was a balance sheet and a P&L that said, if we do it and it doesn't work, we're still getting rich.
Yeah, and I wonder if that changed, if the original motivation, probably from politicians, were that, but if that changed, like, wow, now we have a market to tap in. That this is crazy, and I think that's what it became. It became.
Okay. So what you're saying is there's such a giant market. Obviously, there's 1.4 billion people over there. That this would be good for America. That we would have a lot of new buyers for American product. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you're cutting them a little bit of a break there, and that's a good point to make. They thought there'd be a lot of Chinese customers. We're going to cover how that didn't end up working.
Right.
But you know what? You're giving an argument, for that elite
best case, right?
Best case scenario.
Them, yeah.
And you know what I want to do after this podcast, because we're two guys from. We have no expertise on China. Have you ever been to China? You've been to a lot of places.
No.
I haven't been to China.
No, I have not.
I've been to Japan.
Very good.
I was in Japan last summer.
That's not China, though.
No, it's not China. Actually, Japan's a pretty fascinating place. I went once. I don't know if I'd go again, but a really interesting trip. So I guess I do have a little authority to talk about China because I was in Japan.
Right.
Not really.
Very.
Anyway,
Very good.
What I want to do is I want to have and I want the listeners to know there could be a second part 2 to this podcast where I might bring on a China specialist in trade and geopolitics. I got a couple of people I'd like to talk to about that. So we're going to give kind of the street talk about what we think about China, which not enough people are doing. And then maybe I'll bring in an expert to kind of say, you know what, you're right about this, you're wrong about this, there is some nuance. So there could be a part 1, part 2. Can't promise anything, but I think it's a good idea because we're going to really do a lot of ripping into the Chi-Coms throughout this interview. But before I do that, I have to tell you about Plaza Grande. Plaza Grande. Have you been dreaming of a maintenance-free country club lifestyle in a stunning residence? Look no further than the Plaza Grande in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. People from New Jersey and Philadelphia know that's the old racetrack. Imagine living in a place where you can enjoy luxury community amenities and where everything is just minutes away. Restaurants, retail shopping, groceries, it's all at your fingertips. That's not all. Dive into their pristine swimming pools, take a stroll in nearby stores, tons of activities, pools, movies, mahjong, bingo, you name it, they have it. Get a month free on an 18-month lease or 2 months on a 24-month lease. For more information, head to plazagrandecherryhill.com. plazagrandecherryhill.com. So, all right, we're done with the business. So let's, so you did read the book. And I want to give people a little bit of history, just real quick history. Mao, like a lot of people know the word Mao, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean? When was the first time you heard the word Mao? And I would be shocked.
Probably in a Beatles song.
In a Beatles song?
Yeah.
What song?
What's Revolution, I think.
Oh, okay.
And
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I remember Mao from The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken. These are two guys from a small town in Pennsylvania. They end up in Vietnam. They end up captured. They're both from the same town, and they both get captured together. And I was thinking about that, last night. Well, that's kind of odd that, you'd be captured with your buddy from home in a small town in Pennsylvania. But did you watch The Deer Hunter? If you didn't, I'm going to tell you a great scene.
I've only watched parts of it.
Okay, so there is a scene where they are POWs in the jungles, right, along the river. And the the Chinese, God forbid, the Chinese have we actually fought them too, but we won that one. We're talking about the next fight.
Right.
They're imprisoned, and the guards pull them up and they put them at a table and they play Russian roulette. Now, Russian roulette, you always knew what Russian roulette. You'd spin the gun, 6 chambers. There's 1 chamber in the bullet, and all the Vietnamese prison guards are around them, and they're out in the jungle, and they're gambling on these American POWs to play Russian roulette. And if one blows his head off, it's no big deal.
Right.
But one of the guards, like when the guys are nervous, it's horrifying. It's literally horrifying. While they're putting the gun to their head after spinning the chamber, the American soldier would pull the trigger. But if he was delaying or thinking of not doing it, the Vietnamese communist, Viet Cong, would smack the guy in the face and yell, Mao, Mao, and smack the guy.
Right.
And when I watched that movie as a kid, and then I watched it when I was probably in my 20s, I never thought of Mao. Now, I know Mao is a communist historic figure. I do want to say this. I did some research on that there is no documentation that was ever done to a POW in Vietnam. That was creative liberty by, I forget who actually made The Deer Hunter. But it's a very intense scene. I guess it does bring the horror of being a POW being held by communists. And after we do this podcast in 20 years or 5 years, whatever, I hope that's not me and you playing with our Chinese captors. Right. That's an exaggeration, maybe. So anyway, the Mao thing was kind of used in that movie to mock the American soldier and praise Mao. And so let me give you a little bit about Mao's rule. So Mao in 1949 started the communist movement in China. He was around from 1949 to 1976. And what happened is he was doing, it was like guerrilla warfare. And he actually, he actually started it in the late 20s. And the Chinese nationalists were kind of the anti-communists of the day. And they were willing, so, kicking Mao's ass, his communist troops. So they ran out into the countryside and they hid there, and they would still cause trouble. But the Chinese nationalists, it kind of tamed them a bit. Mm-hmm. But Mao, communism is it's like a virus. It props its head everywhere. It props its head in America, and that's a whole other subject. But Mao stuck around, and he stayed up in the mountains. Then World War II started, so the Japanese start invading China. So now the nationalist Chinese have to spend all their resources to fight Japan, and this is brutal. What the Japanese do to the Chinese is unbelievable. The Chinese have to fight for their lives, but that takes resources away from fighting Mao. Mao, towards the end of the war, or at the end of the war, he makes his move. I think in 1949, he makes his move, and he's able to take over China. And because people were exhausted from fighting. The nationalists were exhausted from fighting the Japanese for, 5 years, 6 years. I don't know the exact amount. So Mao had an opening. He comes out of the mountains, and the communists start kicking the nationalists' ass. And that's when Mao, takes over, communist rule of China. I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting.
And the bloodline of Xi Jinping goes all the way back to Mao, the CCP.
Right. Didn't know that.
Like we're talking about generational communism. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of like going into Iraq and trying to make them, a Jeffersonian democracy.
Right.
They have a culture and a belief system, and what we were talking about before, doing good trade with them, and opening up our markets, and all of a sudden, they're going to start thinking like we do. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work that way. But I will give a silver lining to this in a little bit. But anyway, what does Mao do when he first comes in? He takes over. Agriculture is key, especially back in the 40s or 50s. You got to feed your people.
Yep.
And how many? You want to take a guess at how many starved?
45 million.
You read the book.
Yes, I did.
That was your little test. I was testing you. I was testing you. So basically, 49 million Chinese dead. So some of the other things they do, which a lot of people don't want to talk about, and everyone's heard this in the press in recent years, the Uyghurs. Mm-hmm.
No. Let's go back to the 49 million.
Yeah.
That was all part of the Great Leap Forward.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just so there's understanding. It was 49 million people because I think they moved people off the farms and basically they starved, right? A lot of those people starved during that time period.
You might know more than me. I just look at it, whenever communism, when you centralize government planning,
yes,
even with the best intentions, you are going to F it up beyond any. Look at the Soviet Union, look at Venezuela. Listen, even in America, anything government touches turns bad. Mm-hmm. Even people don't want to believe that, but when they get involved in healthcare, everything goes bad. Education goes bad. The only thing the U.S. government does as a capitalist country that it does well, it has a U.S. military, right? Mm-hmm. That's the one arm that does well because what they do is blow things up. So that's good.
They're good at that.
They're good at that. The government is good at blowing things up. When you get into your healthcare, when you get into your education, and all the other big things that are important to Americans, they stink at that. But the military, they blow things up. But in recent decades, we've seen them take the military from stop blowing things up to start building things, right? And changing people's attitudes and building treatment plants and voting booths in Iraq and Afghanistan. All failures. Mm-hmm. I have to say all failures. Right. I don't know. We'll have to do another show on that. I'm going to say 80-20% rule. Never went well. Never went well, and we paid a lot of blood and treasure for it. So let's go to the Uyghurs, which I wasn't really familiar with. I mean, I've heard the name. I knew that it was they were Muslims. Now, this is what I found.
Of Turkish descent.
Of Turkish descent.
Yeah.
Okay, not Chinese. Well, China kind of goes into all these different regions.
At least that's what Tom Cotton says. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what I found interesting is so the people that remember 1990 World Trade Organization they're allowed into. We allowed communist China into the world. Then 2000 we give them most favored nation status. 17 years later, not that long ago, 7 years ago from today, they're rounding up 1 million to 2 million people, the Uyghurs, and putting them in concentration camps. In concentration camps, and not camps where everything happens there. What has been reported out of there: forced sterilization, sexual assaults. You get caught with a Koran, they'll beat the living hell out of you. This is going on in 2017. That they're doing this to 1 to 2 million people. That like you would think someone would say, "Whoa, what are we doing?" And that's 2005. That's 8 years ago. But no one ever says anything. You hear news about it every once in a while, but it's not in the American culture where we would have been like, wait, that's horrifying. Why do we have China in all our universities? Why is the NBA yelling at firing people and LeBron James is lecturing us? This is what they're doing to people. And I'll give you a proportion kind of argument. And it's not an argument, just to show you something. This might be, I don't want to say it's a straw man argument. It's a bit of a reach, but I'd like to just kind of a little contrast and compare about how America is. And in 1940s, we locked up 120,000 Japanese Americans. I think most of them were Americans with American citizenship. Horrible. Put them they were put into camps, not concentration camps. I mean, obviously, it wasn't great. But they were fed. Their kids still went to school. There was medical assistance. They had little hospitals there. Was it great? Was it ideal? Right. But that was 120,000. Okay, and we were horrified. We're horrified by that. Americans are horrified about we did that to our Japanese citizens, and that's almost 75 years later. Here we are in 2017, and our biggest trading partner, or one of our biggest trading partners, someone that we rely on for pharmaceuticals, military equipment, we just pass over that. You want to?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's proportionality, right?
Yeah, that's the only reason I brought up.
We look at something that we did 75 years ago, and it's horrible, and yet this is going on present day.
Yeah, it's then another thing I like to bring up is Tiananmen Square, and I probably I'm butchering the name. Tiananmen. What did I say? Don't correct. Let's move on. Let's move on. What's interesting? This is 1989, and they literally run tanks over hundreds, if not thousands, of people screaming for freedom.
Right.
But and this is in 1990, we then invite them into the World Trade Organization.
Yeah.
Like, isn't anyone looking at patterns?
Yeah. No.
Like trends or patterns? Like,
right. Tiananmen Square was really that was very strange, right? They ran them over. A lot of people died.
Yeah, hundreds to thousands. They ran them over in tanks. And it looked like America was all behind it. We were rooting them on, and they're flying the flags. And then the Chinese just come in and say, game over.
Yeah.
Game over. Now, that's China, and that's their government, and that's how they handle things. And I do like an idea of not getting involved in everyone's culture. But when you witness something like that, and then 1 year later you say, you know what, let's reward these people and bring them into the World Trade Organization. Yeah. Because they're going to buy a lot of our product, which never really happened. It didn't happen. But so it was definitely a misstep. So then you get to the next religious group. Communists do not like religion. They
It's a
don't.
challenge.
Yeah,
It's a
religious
challenge,
people are a huge challenge because they believe in a higher being, especially in America. You know, good, strong religions of all faiths, kind of doing their thing, is good, and leave them alone. It's baked in our Constitution. With the communists, when you have a very centralized rule by specific certain people, they don't want anyone talking about God. That's your rights from God.
Right.
They really don't want to hear that. So there was the Falun. You're going to have to correct me on the pronunciation. I should really kind of phonetically kind of write these things so it sounds better. But I'm going to pronounce it. It's called the Falun Gong religion. Falong
Yeah.
Gong religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination of like Buddhism, Taoism, and then like Chinese folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, these people, and this is more of a modern kind of religious group. It's not that old. I mean, it didn't come up in like the 16th century. It's relatively new, but they've imprisoned about 1 million of them from Falun Gong, and supposedly this is where they were harvesting organs. Like if you had a kidney and they needed your kidney, they take the kidney. When it came to your heart, they might have convicted you
Right.
in a trial,
Right.
and then before they execute you, they take
your
the heart.
Yeah.
And they took blood types of everyone who came in and their health records.
Wow.
That it's like
Yeah.
you're talking, like this is not discussed.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not discussed at all. It's always about trade and China and be respectful and but this is like sci-fi horror
Scary
movie.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now the next one are the Tibetans because they are so religious.
Mhm.
And I guess they got invaded decades ago by the Chinese,
Right.
and the brutality has never stopped. Even to this day,
Mhm.
Tibetans, I think they've calmed it down, the issue in China, because they've gotten to the children now. Like your generations where the children are now indoctrinated and they speak to the higher power is not the Dalai Lama. The higher power is the CCP and Xi Jinping.
Right.
But they've done a ton of brutality in Tibet.
Yeah.
Real tough stuff. The next thing I had on the list was the one-child policy, forced abortions, and you know when that policy ended? It's not a
Recently,
quiz.
right?
Yeah, recently,
Yeah,
2015.
recently. Yeah.
I find that now they have a big problem.
No, they have a huge problem.
They
Yeah.
don't. They have a aging population,
Yeah.
and fertility issues.
Mhm.
They're not that human capital. Now there's plenty of Chinese people. There's 1.4 billion, but that they've created. Here's something that a lot of people don't know. With the one policy thing, like sometimes they let you slide on a boy, but they wouldn't let you slide on a girl. Right? These are forced abortions
Mhm.
because the male in the Chinese culture is considered more of an asset. I guess.
Sure. Yep.
Everything is about what helps.
Yeah.
The
They can work the fields or work.
yeah, they can be soldiers.
Yeah. Right.
They really frown. The boys they'd overlook. Now there's villages out in the countryside in China where there's these roaming men.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like on bicycles and they're dangerous as hell because there's no women.
Right.
And as you know, women tend to,
Right.
I'm not insulting you, I'm joking.
Domesticate you.
Yeah, women tend to, kind of temper men's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Kind of that aggressive. So they have a huge problem with that. And there's a name for them, and I forget what the name is, but I'm just picturing these kind of roaming, poor Chinamen out there on bicycles. They don't have much of a future.
And what's interesting, so they changed the policy, and but they can't change the birth rate dramatically like they want, because now it's been so ingrained that Chinese
Culture.
they don't want
the culture's adopted.
they don't want children.
Yeah. They've now become consumers or starting to become consumers.
Yeah.
They're not, no comparison to the American consumer.
No, absolutely.
I do find it disturbing. The American progressives, and I'm not saying Democrats, they love abortion. They love abortion. Another philosophy with American progressives, Democrats, progressives are part of the Democratic movement, and they're left. The more left you go, the closer you get to communism. And they do like promoting abortion like it's healthcare. They also think it's going to save the planet. There's a bigger kind of thing, like with the Chinese government making these decisions. There was a bigger goal for everybody. And I find American progressives kind of they suck right into that. Elon Musk and a lot, not even Elon, is the more people you have, the more human capital you have.
Sure.
And you figure it out. And the world can take a lot more people, and we'll probably start putting people on Mars at some time. Or we'll figure out other things. Humans are capable, but don't kill your don't stop producing. I think that is so important. But the left.
Well, it's very interesting because 60 Minutes did a program, I think it might have been this past Sunday, but they did one on Japan and how the population bust has affected this. And they were showing a guy that actually makes these little dolls of kids and puts them around the village because there are no kids. So people can actually get the joy of seeing a child. Yes.
I was driving by in my neighborhood and I saw this little guy walking next to the stroller, and it always brings you a little bit of joy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's why they have the dolls.
I don't. Yeah, to have that feeling of being alive.
To give you that dopamine.
Yeah. It's
and there's so much truth. You see a child or a baby, or you see some video or whatever, it's so human, it's genetic, it's in our coding, it releases
it's so
a
human
feeling.
That it cuts across cultural, racial, class. Everyone can connect with a baby or sees a baby.
We kind of outlined a lot of the terrible stuff that we've seen coming out of China, which a lot of people don't want to talk about for so many reasons. So one thing is the people that made this decision about inviting China into the organizations, making them part of the world family, they thought you can't change a culture's DNA. It's not easy. And especially a brutal culture and an authoritarian culture, unless you totally wreck it. And that's what we did in Japan.
Yeah.
And Germany.
Yeah. And it's interesting for China to be China the way it is. They probably have to be authoritarian. Why? Because they have a lot of different sects. They have areas or differing people. That's what we don't realize, is that it's not all one, monolithic
ethnicity.
Culture.
So
to put that together, you have to have an authoritarian government. Or a government that believes. I mean, you'd like to think, okay, a democracy could work, but maybe it can't,
Yeah, it's not Western Europe.
Yeah.
Where they have they're all Frenchmen. Not anymore. That's changing.
Yeah.
But, we've been able to pull it off in America.
Yeah. With over time. But
in the Middle East, a lot of people think, all the Saudis, they're dealing with all different types of people in the Middle East. Iraq was, and then you get into the religious thing.
Yeah.
You're all Arabs, but you're Sunni and you're Shia.
Right.
But what I guess my pushback on that, not that you were trying to make an excuse for China, is that a lot of, well, who knows? I was going to say there's a lot of places in the world are being included with multi-ethnicities, but what you're saying is when you have that, it's more likely you're going to have an authoritarian.
If you want to keep it together,
if
right?
you want to keep it together, or unless you build the Constitution of freedom, a democracy thing, which I guess has been a noble effort by America for years. I think we've lost our way in recent years on trying to do that. Seems like that vision of kind of giving the world freedom has been severely corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
It's been corrupted. I actually think we'll get back to China right now. I think it's been I think the bringing them in after listing all those atrocities had to do with cash flow, great cash flows by doing the deal with China.
Yeah,
that rule, that was the priority. Not making China free. Right. I don't think any of the guys in corporate America, Wall Street, or the lobbyists or the politicians were going, we're gonna really make them a democracy. I don't think they were thinking that way. I think it was like, the government wants us to do business with them. They opened the doors.
Right.
It's a gold rush.
Right.
Let's go there.
Right.
But now your kids and your grandkids might pay a pretty big price for it. The other thing is, the writing is on the wall that they want to go to war. Or the Chinese might not, according to them, the 50-year plan or whatever, they want to have to go to a war. They think that they'll be able to control enough of the trade and have a big enough military across the globe that they'll just kind of own us like they quietly took Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same way. It'll be different. I don't know what that version looks like, but I would like to go over, just rattle off some facts.
Sure.
They got 4 million in the military, okay? That easily doubles ours. The Chinese Navy has more ships and a technology edge right now. That's according to the war games done by the Department of Defense, unless they're lying to us and they're just looking for a bigger budget. I don't know, but that's what you read. In 2 years, they're going to match all our nuclear warheads. We've built 18 to 20 warships in the past 5 years and 6 submarines. They got 50 to 70 from what we know, and they have 20 subs. So they're doubling or tripling their military buildup compared to the United States. They have supersonic missile technology. And what I understand, right now, unless we're not being told, they have the advantage. China actually makes parts and equipment for the U.S. military.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
They make parts and equipment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they do. Hey, listen, you could be putting in a sink, a whole new kitchen, and a faucet's missing. You don't have a kitchen till you get that faucet.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. And here's another thing. Americans think it's not a big deal. We are so good and smart and wonderful. Like in World War II with the Germans, we can just catch up like that if we have to. If we have to take on the Chinese, we can, like, thinking what we did 75 years ago is a guarantee of what we might have to do in 2030. First of all, we're fatter, we're lazier, we're more spoiled, we're broke. And to think like, oh yeah, we're just going to kick it in like the greatest generation did. It's like a hardened people.
Right.
Like, you can't even compare.
Right.
You can't compare to our parents, grandparents, and then go to us, our kids, and people's grandkids. I still believe in America, but you better start doing some work. If you think you're going to turn it on, it's like a diabetic who's been smoking and drinking on the couch, and you're like, hey, dude, you got to run a marathon on Monday.
Right.
It's not happening.
Right.
I like that. I just pulled that out of my head. I just thought about that. You know what they call that? Hubris.
Yes.
American hubris.
Yeah.
And we think we own it. This is the greatest country in the world. And, all that hubris, that's not work. That's just talk. And you know who's working? China.
Yeah.
China. They're working overtime on us. But that's a big thing. That's just giving you a recap of what's going on in the military. And let's get to the economic stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think from the economic thing? You've been watching, the trade and everything. What's the economy, China lining up U.S. economy against China?
From what I understand is that they can handle, and this, I'll give you something that's counter to this, that they handle a lot of the lower end things, that they handle the lower end manufacturing. Now, Apple would say that's changed, right? No, actually, it's not the cheapest labor. It's their intellectual. It's what they've learned throughout the years.
Yeah, Tim Cook.
Yeah, Tim Cook said that. Yeah.
The problem with that is Tim Cook and Apple took all their technology 25 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
And taught them how to do it.
Yeah.
So now they've gained that manufacturing knowledge and that intellect and all that ability is because Tim Cook picked up with the rest of corporate America and went over there, and that's where they built it. And of course, when you live in that environment, the outcome of that is having all these great technical people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think I heard Tim Cook say that, and I fervently disagreed with him.
Right.
He caused it. He's part of the problem.
Right. So did you disagree with what he said, or with the fact that he led to it?
I agree with what he said. He was kind of saying, "Oh, we're not chasing cheap labor." No, you did in the beginning.
Right.
But then as your phones got more sophisticated, you started building along, and that's where they gained all that.
Exactly.
Elon Musk talks about that all the time. I was in the manufacturing business. You learn by building things.
Yeah.
And when you build things, you make them better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the American factory floor, where you keep learning, and everyone kind of travels along with you. All the American citizens getting more skilled, more technical, all coming up along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
What we did is we pulled it all out, gave them to them, and that is true. The Chinese and a lot of people across the world, Chinese especially, have gotten very capable.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened to our manufacturing people in a lot of these towns across America? They got nothing.
Yeah.
They got unemployment for a while. And then what we did, Big Pharma was able to get them addicted on opioids. So they wouldn't feel the pain of having no future.
Right.
So you know what? You could throw a little shade on, I don't know if it's throwing shade on people like Tim Cook who talk that way. I
have one other, you started to ask me that and directed the question, but I do have a thought on the whole part of, who's complicit. Because in a way, I think Americans, you could go down the line, are complicit.
Oh, absolutely. We all want cheap stuff.
Yeah, we all want cheap stuff. We know it's made from China, and we buy it.
Yeah.
And because we can buy 3 or 4 to 1 made in the U.S.
Yeah.
And President Trump said something interesting, about toys. Like, hey, maybe you don't have to have 20 different toys. You can have 1 or 2.
He's absolutely right.
Yeah. And we become such a consumption society, and it's almost a disease. It's an addiction. People go on, and not just a few people, a lot of people, probably a pretty high percentage.
Props up our economy.
Yeah.
Because we don't manufacture anymore, so you got to buy stuff.
Yeah. And you can go to Shein, and you can go to these other places and buy. It's so ridiculously low, and I think that's changing. But buy a skirt or a shirt for $3.
Yeah.
$4.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they're like disposable.
Yeah, disposable. Fast fashion. That's what they call
everything.
Part of it. Yeah.
Washing machines are that way. I had a washing machine we took out of the building we bought. I had it in my house for 20 years. I go out and buy a new modern washer with a water saver, whatever you got to buy. They last 3 years. Then I got to go buy another one. The energy, just as all to protect the climate. Yeah. The energy with me buying 2 more washer machines in a span of 10 years or 7 years, it might have been 7 years.
Right.
The energy to build them with the old one using a little bit more water.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I can't do the calculation because I'm not an engineer, but I'm like, something's not right here. This washer machine has a 3-year life. This thing lasted 20 years at least.
Yeah.
It might have been in the building for 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and let me tell you, the guy that was complaining about that, and I'm glad you brought up the toys. You really don't, like Trump said, you don't need $20. And know what else we don't need? We don't need all that guy's plastic in the ocean. all these plastic toys, okay? This guy Mattel is probably the CEO of Mattel. Maybe you should make toys you can make here, real simple stuff, more educational stuff. All this Marvel crap you're making, that ends up in the ocean in a landfill for 1,000 years. That guy, I would go after. He was not attacking Trump. I don't want to. But I could tell he's Mr. Smarty Pants CEO. Well, we're not going to bring manufacturing back here. Trump's trying to get things done. And hey, listen, it's a free country. You can criticize Trump. Go at it. Listen, that's all that goes on every day in the media. But you know what? The counterpunch to him is, listen, dude, you're polluting the whole world, and we're sick of it. Okay? There are plastic islands, 1,000-mile islands of plastic moving through the ocean, and it's full of your plastic toys. You
know what? And there's not only plastic in the ocean, there's plastic in us.
Yeah. So
that's where it ends
up.
You're
killing the oceans and us.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was it. I like that. I like that you brought that up about the toy making. That's something I could really dig into. This is what. Here's something that they didn't expect. The Chinese the Chi-coms, when they're using capitalism, right, with communism. Mm-hmm. So if you come over there to invest with them and you want to build a manufacturing plant or a cement plant, and you're American investors or whatever, and there's a bunch of houses in the way, what would take 2 years here in America to get them out of the way, if you could do it, China just bulldozes them for you.
Yeah.
And then relocates the people.
Yeah.
Then you take it to the subsidies. That's what's really killing us.
Sure.
They pick an industry like steel or aluminum or electronic parts, and they say, don't worry, sell it at this price. We'll fund your payrolls. We'll give you the no interest loans. We'll give you all that. Flood the market, drive all the global competitors out. Then we can raise the prices. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't work well enough, we'll manipulate our currency. So if the yuan, is that the right way to pronounce it?
I think so,
yeah. The yuan. If the yuan's 50 cents to the American dollar, I'm making up these numbers. I don't need anyone emailing me at oldgravypodcast@gmail.com if you want to comment on it. I don't need anyone saying, oh, that's not, it's not 50 cents to a dollar. Whatever it is, they'll lower it to 20 cents. They'll manipulate their currency, which is against all the rules of the World Trade Organization.
Right.
They violate these rules every day.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they flood the market even more. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, we've trying to put this genie back in the bottle. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to this point about tariffs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a way to put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, it's a start.
It's a start.
It's definitely a start. And listen, we're not like, oh, don't buy China. And no one's saying bring the Democrats. They're saying, oh, Trump wants to bring every factory back to America. That's not true. We want to diversify our supply chain. See, if it's in Vietnam, it's better than being in China. If it's in India, it's better than being in China. India is a democracy, by the way. So it's far more sophisticated than the attack lines they're coming from the left. But if we want to get more product into China, we have to punish them with tariffs because we do want that market. That was the original deal. Well, we got to get in your market.
Right. As far as economic decision, looking at tariffs, I've always, been taught, whether it's right or wrong, that economically you don't want to have tariffs. I guess that assumes that other countries don't have tariffs or.
You want fair trade.
Fair trade.
Yeah,
you want fair trade.
Free trade.
But this is a political decision. That's what this is. At least to start out, it may. We want it to change the economy. We want factories again, like you said, not all over. Not factories that they'll be elsewhere in the world. We understand that, but this is a political decision. To change the relationship.
Yes, against, and what we're trying to say here, against someone that is literally looking to dominate us.
Who makes political decisions all the time. Yes.
Yeah, it's someone that their goals, their future is to dominate the world. They want our job. and they don't even want to share it.
Right.
They want it.
Right.
There's no, that's the way they act. And we just went through some of the horrible things they'll do to make sure they get what they want. And they lie, they cheat, they steal. They do very little in R&D. You know why?
They don't have to.
They steal it.
Right.
They steal it. They put people into our universities. They hack 24/7. When you do business with them, and I'm going to talk about Hollywood and Joe Biden in a minute. When you do business with them, you have to become a partner with them. And when you when you start being a partner with them, they start learning everything. Not everything is just stealing code or algorithms, though that's part of it. The other part is learning how to do it from you. And then once you've learned how the best do it, it's kind of like McDonald's just handing over the secret sauce, or how the proper way to assemble something, the type of machine. Like America has so much intellectual property, and then they go over there, these big corporations, and partner with them, and either they do it right out in the open because you're business partners, you can see what's going on, or they hack you, they steal secrets. They literally have people. They have people working in the federal government today in our bureaucracy are definitely working with the Chinese, and they could be Chinese Americans. They could be people just on a payroll with them. Who knows? Yeah.
One of the things that struck me is how being a totalitarian state and us being a representative republic and democracy, and open society, it's very difficult to fight against that when they're willing to throw so much in terms of resources.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to pick up. I mean, they have the simple ways of like LinkedIn, use LinkedIn, find out who's worked where.
Yeah.
It's simple. I mean,
Well, we've invited them in.
Yes.
No, it's not like we're saying, okay, we're going to do business with you. You stay over here and we'll stay over here. We'll send our No, they've kind of brought us in.
Yeah.
And my understanding is people who travel to China and do business in China, they're very gracious.
Yeah, I'm sure they're are.
Very
of course.
gracious.
Yeah.
My brother had an asthma attack over there, like out in the middle of nowhere, talking to a Chinese thing. He's a global banker or whatever. Right. He has an asthma attack because he's allergic to bottom fish. So, next thing you know, he don't have an EpiPen. He feels his lungs. So he's like, listen, I'm done. Before I get up there, I got to go to the hospital. So they get him in a car. He's not incapacitated. They drive him to the hospital. He's sitting in there and, they give him a shot and whatever. And when he walks out into the lobby, there's like 40 guests from the dinner there. Chinese guys.
Wow.
Yeah. All sitting there making sure their guest is okay.
Wow.
Now, regardless of that that's a very nice story.
Right. Yeah.
But regardless of that, that doesn't mean they can't be human beings.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe they show up and they're like, big executive banker having problem. We all go to show him we love him, so he'll give us better terms. I don't know.
Right.
But I always thought that was a funny story. Here's another thing, jumping into the China Belt and Road Initiative. You familiar with that? So if not, you've heard of it.
Yeah,
You've heard of it.
Yeah.
So basically China now is going to Laos, Cambodia, Pakistan, Sudan, Ethiopia, some of the worst places, dangerous places in the world, full of poverty, full of strife, civil war. They go in and they build railways, they build ports, airports, and they make a deal with the country. We'll finance it. They give them wonderful, rate to finance it. They might not get paid back for 100 years. They're long-term thinkers. But in the meantime, they are building a global trade routes that they can control. They're building military outposts where their ships can sail into. And believe me, in this day, controlling trade routes over the oceans, over the seas is huge. Look at the Houthis. My understanding is when I guess they were firing into the Red Sea. when they're lobbing missiles at maritime ships carrying product, that's a problem. That's one band of terrorists in Yemen, screwing up the trade channels. China thinks about that. And that's why this China Belt and Road Initiative is going on. And I think they did it in the Panama Canal recently, that they were infiltrating into the Panama Canal. And some people get all hyped up about the solution. My understanding right now, and I want to look deeper into it, but we're not talking about the Panama Canal today. Maybe I'll talk it on Kale and Company on Monday, 6 to 10, but this won't be produced by then, so I can't plug myself. So the Panama Canal thing, my understanding is Trump and the DOD and Hegseth, they pretty much went down there and pretty much got them out of there. So the solutions to some of this stuff doesn't need to be discussed for 5 years and well, that's not how it works and that's not how you do it. I think we need to expedite some of our reactions to China now, forcefully and quickly. And it doesn't mean everything is going to end in a war. But this China Belt and Road Initiatives, we did that too, right? We did that influencing countries through Radio America, say, promoting propaganda. China does that too through their Confucius Institutes in America. Are you familiar with them? They were hundreds of them throughout America, and they were planted in universities or public art centers, basically all Chinese propaganda. It's the number, if there was a few hundred, there's now 5, I heard.
Right.
They've been run out of town, and I think Donald Trump ran them out of town. I think it was like, you're not coming here to promote your Chinese communist propaganda. So that action was taken with that before Biden came in. Biden wasn't going to do anything to the Confucius thing.
Right.
I mean, him and his son took too much money, and Jake Tapper is even telling us that. He actually said it on news. There's no doubt that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden took millions of dollars from China.
Oh, it was obvious.
Yeah, it's obvious. But I mean,
it only took 4 years later, right? Or after everyone else is saying it. But
so we did this. We do same things across the world. The problem with ours sucks. They're building highways in Ethiopia and Pakistan. They're building ports. They're building airports, railroads. Worse, and I'm exaggerating a bit here, but U.S. aid was kind of an arm of the CIA. And we're more into, getting rainbow flags to be flown in Muslim countries and third world countries, doing an Arab Sesame Street to influence the children. There was a George Floyd mural in Afghanistan, in Kabul.
Right.
Like, where'd the money come from? This USAID thing, and I'm exaggerating. USAID was doing other things, feeding people, working on disease. Probably, it cost 10 times as much because everyone's got their hands in the pot. But the Chinese are building, we're doing the bullshit work. These people are building airports and railroads and ports in these countries. I don't know what we're doing. I really don't know what USAID was doing, but that's all changed.
Yeah,
thank God. I'm sure the Rubio as the secretary now is making a lot of changes where we're really nuts and bolts type of stuff is in the pipeline. I think. Right, but that can change in 4 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
That's what's tough in America. Things change in 4 years. I did have a little section here called China Has Infiltrated Our Government. And that actually comes from the book you just read.
Yeah.
China funds a ton of think tanks in this group. They use lobbying proxies to influence politicians heavily. And it's funny, I hear on X, I always hear everybody screaming about AIPAC, which is a Jewish lobbying group. No one's screaming about China. They're screaming about AIPAC, how much influence Israel has here. What I say, Israel has a return on an investment, right? If American Jews are, and do they have too much influence? Probably. lobbying has too much influence across the board, and they're probably have way too much influence. But China is our rival. Israel is our ally. And matter of fact, lately, they've done a heck of a job wiping out the Iranian defense systems. No one even talks about that. During this whole Gaza thing and Hezbollah, they've been wiping out defense systems in Iran. Iran has never been weaker. Never mind not listening to the Biden administration and killing off Iranian proxies. And that's Hezbollah and Hamas. So if AIPAC for the last 2 years, doing a bang up job, getting the Israelis to do all this, it's dirty work, and they're doing it. And it's ugly. War's ugly. But Hezbollah and Hamas are the worst. And the head of the snake is Iran. So I got off on a tangent that China has a very strong lobbying arm, but it's done in a more sophisticated, very underhanded way. And they should really take a look at it. And I said before that we probably do have Chinese operatives working in the federal bureaucracy. Hackers are into everyone's system. The Chinese hackers, they're into every system in America, and they're fighting them every day. The federal government, the military, but a lot of Americans are screaming about Elon doing his audits, that Elon's stealing their credit card, their social security numbers.
Right.
Like, think about the amount of energy and effort about Elon stealing. Yeah. Like, Elon wants your social security number, George.
Right.
Yeah, really.
Don't worry, the Chinese got it already.
He already got it when he was at PayPal.
Yeah, right.
Because you were a big PayPal guy, as I remember. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, that was true.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm spot on.
Yeah.
Here was another thing. We're saying that they're involved in our politics. Even Jeb Bush has a big real estate portfolio, and allegedly. And listen, I'm not faulting. And we're up to our necks in China. So I'm just kind of just showing you how tied we are to them, and their ultimate game is to own us. Maybe people don't believe that. I do believe that, obviously, because I've been going on this rant for an hour and a half. But Jeb Bush real estate deals have Chinese money behind them. George Bush has gone out and done a lot of speeches where it's allegedly that some of the money does come from Chinese groups that want to hear him speak. And I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because that's just how the elites think it works.
Yeah. Well, if they're gonna go after military, like former and defense companies, and they're going to put resources towards that, wouldn't you put your resources towards bigger fish, like President Bush or any of the presidents? Of course you would. That's where you can get huge amount of influence. So and you probably, don't have to put a lot of money in it. I mean, and they're probably willing to do that. They're probably willing to put a lot.
Yeah, no. If you pick a big target with a big brand, you're going to get more bang for. You're going to get more bang for your buck. It's complicated. I'm not sitting here saying that unwinding this disaster is easy.
No.
It's very complicated. I will defend the Bushes in one thing. At least they offered a service. Jeb Bush's companies would build the building. George Bush would give the speech and give his opinion. So he did do something.
Right.
Where Joe and Hunter, all they were doing were like, listen, we'll give you whatever, we're going to give you influence. Whatever you need, that's why we need the bag of money.
Right.
And that's really the big difference. At least they're working for it. The bottom line is, in 1990, we should have never allowed it. It's crazy. I was going to get into, what's his name? Eric, the congressman from California who slept with the Chinese spies. We're talking about infiltrating. Yeah, Fang Fang.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric Swalwell.
Okay.
Oh my God, he's so annoying. He's allegedly. Wait. He allegedly slept with the Chinese, who worked on his campaign.
Right.
But the FBI said, yeah, she's a spy. We got to talk to you. So my question is, if he slept with the spy, if that was a Republican and Comey was still the FBI director, why wouldn't we get the text between him and Fang Fang?
Yeah,
Like what? I'd like Kash Patel to tell us.
Yeah.
And then you had, what was her name? Senator Feinstein.
Mm-hmm.
She was in a wheelchair. She was almost, I mean, like she's our McConnell.
Right.
McConnell should be gone.
Right.
The guy, he should be gone just based on his age and his health. But Feinstein, worse condition than I think McConnell, though McConnell's in rough shape, but he's totally anti-Trump. Her driver for decades, her personal driver, he was a Chinese spy.
And didn't she also had a woman in there too, right?
Oh, they probably infiltrated the office.
Higher up. I think on that. I remember seeing the photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of this is kind of doom and gloom, but I wonder if all this, you could say, Chinese overreach, could backfire on them.
I know where you're going with this. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's sentiment against them, right? There's a lot of people that are against them.
And who brought that?
No doubt, Trump.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Now people feel like they can talk about it.
Yeah.
Now business people are like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's reevaluate our supply chain.
Yeah. And they have to. But, and one thing you've said, and a lot of people say, is, well, they think 100 years ahead. They think so far ahead, like they're playing 3D chess. Well, was the one-child policy, was that playing 3D chess?
They're human.
That's, of course they are. And when you talked about building the roads, that's a lot of money.
Could bankrupt them.
Yeah, that's a lot of money that you're putting into these different countries.
No, you're right.
So
you're getting. So here's the pushback. Keep going. What else you got?
The fact that their birth rates are so low, and that they exacerbated and really started the problem. That's one thing. Now the tariffs, they're not going to be selling as much as they've sold in the past, obviously. And to find other markets that are, what may happen is that, Europe doesn't want these goods dumped on them either.
No.
So they're probably going to have tariffs too.
Europe's full of protection.
Yeah, of course. And they're going to have it there too. So that is probably going to hurt them. And they're not able to take that and say, okay, we're going to be a consumption-based economy.
Right.
Like not on a dime, that's for sure.
Right. But what you said, and they're all really good points, but you can't wait for your adversary to screw up. You have to throw roadblocks in the way. And it seems like we're starting that.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add one big point, which what the bankers, the politicians, and the corporate executives told us years ago is that this, and now it's how many years later since 1990, 35 years later. 35 years later, it might take another 10 years, but their middle class in China has now got accustomed to being middle class. And that's a risk to the Communist Party, to the CCP.
Yeah.
And in the end, I would still say we shouldn't have taken this route because it's not playing 3D chess. It's playing back to what we were saying, Russian roulette with the Chinese. Oh, maybe they'll screw up and trip up. Maybe our idea is right, but that was a big risk we took.
Right.
But in the end, the middle class of China and all the other stuff you just said, bankrupting themselves, not being able to sell their products, tariffs. If the middle class starts to rise up in China demanding that their status of living does not get screwed by the global economy or by America, maybe that would it would take the communist Chinese down a few notches, their power and overreach, or destroy them. That is a possibility.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to but you brought it up, and I'm glad you did because that was going to be part. Like I like that as like to give a little positive to it, and I like that you brought it up because we kind of just gave our listeners a nice, kind of a balanced approach. But now we're going to get back into bashing them. Okay, because whenever you're in a street fight, you have to you can't wait to get
Right.
lucky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is one other thing, and I think this was probably this all started with Trump first term, right?
Yes.
This started with Trump.
Absolutely.
So-
he was talking China.
So what did he? So he put pressure on them early on. And how did they respond? They moved some of their manufacturing to different countries, right? They moved it some to Vietnam. They moved some to Mexico, right? I mean, famously, a lot of people know that. One thing that you could say, and again, I'll give you more pushback, and this is the last part, is that now they've taught other areas, other countries what they learned.
Well, how has China taught them?
By bringing their manufacturing there. Let me give you one point.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So China has actually subcontracted a lot of work to other countries.
Okay. And they might be learning just like the Chinese learned.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example here.
Yeah, it's fluid.
Mexican labor costs are 2 to 3 times less than Chinese now, from what I've heard, and they're more skilled. That's interesting.
That's an interesting
That comes
statistic.
from Peter Zion, and he does a lot of stuff on that.
Yeah.
Probably gets it from somewhere else, but very interesting that how and that comes from because that original push.
You know what?
In the beginning.
And one thing is, and what happens when you discuss politics and stuff like this, you become so entrenched in that there's no way out. There's only one solution to it.
Yeah.
But it's a very complex world.
Yeah.
Everything is fluid,
Mm-hmm.
and capturing just what the political kind of idea, vitriol, whatever the debate is.
Right.
But I agree with you, and I do think but the biggest hope would be China's own middle class, which I think they're starting to get worried about.
I think they are too. I think that's one other thing too.
The other thing China has, first of all, let's say it all works out in the end for us, but what they've done is still unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
Like what we've gone through here is still unforgivable. They still need to be put in their place. There still needs to be change. Not that we have to do it all ourselves, but if they do change, I don't want to say there has to be retribution, but we right. learn the lesson. That's what I'm saying. So we don't do it somewhere else.
Right.
That would be my. But here I want to get into some society stuff, cultural thing, how they got involved. For years, corporate America was afraid of offending China, offending them.
Yeah.
Hollywood, the LeBron. We don't have to go into all that, but they literally were like, "Oh my God, NBA, this is a huge market. We are not going to offend these people." And it was the Houston Rockets general manager who just said, "Freedom for Hong Kong," or "I support Hong Kong."
Yeah.
He was gone within a year. The NBA president was like, "Well, I'm not firing him." And then LeBron's like, "You should talk about things. Free speech can have a downside." Like, oh my God, it's like, dude.
You should have just kept, and Steve Kerr also talking about it.
I could do a whole show on
but
Steve Kerr.
he don't mention. That if you're going to just don't mention it.
Yeah, Steve Kerr. I got an axe to grind with that guy, and unfortunately, I think it's because he lost his dad to terrorists in Lebanon, who was a professor there, and I think he's carried that kind of childhood trauma where he wants to be everything's good. It's just a way to, and I shouldn't be psychoanalyzing this guy, but I will, because he analyzes the right all the time. Mm-hmm. So I analyze him as real serious trauma. Doesn't want to deal with his dad was killed. He was a professor at the American University. Yeah. They come in, they execute him or whatever. The guy doesn't want to deal with it. There's bad people in the world. Mm-hmm. Evil. There's evil in the world. And what do you do with evil? You either contain it or eradicate it. Mm-hmm. That's really the two things you can only do with it. That's why guys get locked in cages for the rest of their life, or they get shot and killed by the police. There is evil. People have to they have to come to terms with that. That's a philosophical thing.
I see that.
But I'm going to move on.
Okay.
Like the TikTok. Like I don't want them to turn off TikTok, because I think TikTok is not a concern. Of all the stuff we're doing, turning off TikTok isn't one of them, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, they're collecting data on your kids. I know there's all this
You know
sophistication
what?
stuff.
I think I'm not sure the data issue is very important. I think how they steer the conversation is more of an issue.
Did you go on TikTok at all?
No.
I'm not a big TikToker, but let me tell you something. It is addictive. I will say that.
Yeah.
I brought up something that, I don't know, these hot moms dancing.
Right.
Oh my God. I'm just going, like, it's like unbelievable. There's like moms in their kitchen who are like smoking hot dancing.
Right.
And next thing you know, an hour's gone by.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Not an hour, 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
No more than 10 minutes. But anyway, I don't want to get into TikTok, but we did a little bit. We talked about the Confucius Institutes. They got thrown out. Here's another thing. JP Morgan, get a load of this. They had a program. This is like infiltration. It was called Sons and Daughters Program. And they hired relatives, like kids, of powerful Chinese elites to work at the bank. Here in America, over in China. Can you believe, like,
No.
I would have dropped the dime to Al Sharpton and said, Al, how many Black Americans are in New York City, and your biggest bank, JP Morgan, is importing Chinese kids to get all the internships?
Yeah.
I mean, call anybody.
Yeah.
But like you talk about, if Al Sharpton had a grievance, that would have been a good grievance. Where are the young Black Americans coming, maybe not coming out of Harvard and Yale, but out of all these other schools, the Black universities, the traditional Black universities, get them into JP Morgan, not the Chinese elites.
Yeah.
Well, you know what happened to JP Morgan? They got sued by the federal government.
Yeah, I was like,
it was an anti-corruption law.
And what happened?
They paid $250 million.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you can't do that.
No, $264 million. I actually wrote it down.
Yeah.
And, let's take like the fentanyl. They're shipping fentanyl to the cartels in Mexico, the ingredients.
Yeah.
They in the last 5 years, there's like 400,000 dead. I'm not saying that's all due to fentanyl, just drug overdoses, but we're talking hundreds of thousands that died of fentanyl.
Right.
Like that's almost as many men that were killed in World War II.
Yeah.
And China is sending the ingredients to the cartels, which literally own huge chunks of Mexico. They're a terrorist organization, like Trump named them. But it's like, hey, we can't tariff them. They can kill hundreds of thousands of Americans. But what are we going to make our own shoes here?
Right.
It's crazy.
It's interesting. We've gone close to an hour and a half, and
are you getting tired?
We just mentioned the fentanyl.
No, I know.
Which is so major. That just shows how much material there is here.
Yeah. And it's the other thing we've done, which is really dangerous in the universities, which I find interesting. China's given billions of dollars to American universities over the last 25 years. You know who's given more? Qatar.
Wow.
Qatar.
Wow.
Qatar has given more money. And maybe that's why I started noticing on college campuses the anti-Semitism. I told a friend years ago, a Jewish friend, I'm like, man, Democratic Party's getting pretty anti-Israel, anti-Jewish. But it's like, oh no, it's just Israel. It's just Israel. Well, anyway, it started affecting their kids at these universities. But Qatar has been one of the biggest, bigger than China. And when Chinese students come to America, when they come to America, they study math, science at these universities. They're not studying philosophy.
Right.
They're not. They're studying really hardcore science to take it back to China. And I'll just give you a story. I'm going to be very general about it, but it still makes me like suspicious. We had a brilliant young Chinese guy work for us. Both his parents were Chinese diplomats, and he would say to me, Tom, they're communists or whatever. And you remember as well as I do. We had a friendship with him beyond, and he was an intern, and then he was kind of a contract employee. And what's so weird he disappeared. I've tried to find him.
Yeah.
I find it so weird.
Yeah.
Now, I can't tell the audience how. I don't feel like getting all into it. I just feel it's weird.
Yeah.
He's gone. He built a business in California. There's no trace of him. Because I can usually find someone if I want to find him. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's, living in a different part of the country or whatever, still doing his business. But I couldn't find it. I thought, I don't know what to think. It's just bizarre. Totally bizarre. But my point is, we wouldn't wanted to allow German citizens in the 1930s, with the Nazi Party controlling Germany, working on sensitive stuff in our universities and learning sensitive stuff. But we do it with China, like someone said, the University of California at San Diego, like 1 in 7 students were Chinese citizens.
Right.
And the University of San Diego invited the Dalai Lama to speak. I don't know. This is like in 2017. Mm-hmm. They invite the Dalai Lama. China's so pissed, they cut off all the scholarships to the 5,000 Chinese students. They don't care about the Chinese students. Come home. We don't give a crap.
Right.
But University of San Diego wants to do that to us, invite the Dalai Lama, boom.
Yeah.
You're out of business.
Yep.
And, the last thing I want to talk about, and I mean, I could go, we could do a Joe Rogan here for 3 hours, but I got to wrap it up. The whole Hollywood thing, when Joe Biden was the vice president, this is great. Joe Biden goes over with the Hollywood people to negotiate the deal, and to get more movies made in China, to get more movies accepted. Meanwhile, they've banned, made them change Kung Fu Panda, all these changes. The best one was, which was a great movie that was made in the 80s, where the Russians invade America. What was that movie?
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
Yeah.
Red It So there was a remake in 2012.
Yeah. Yes.
And the remake in 2012 was it was China invading America, but Hollywood started panicking with the producers. Are you out of your mind?
Right.
So they actually went in and digitized everything and made it North Korea.
Yes.
So now you got to think, North Korea is a starving country. Even its soldiers are starving. I don't know. It has 25 million people compared to China's 1.4
billion.
1.4 billion. So this little starving country is going to have enough resources to invade America. Mm-hmm. You talk, there's a whole list, but I always want to take a good opportunity to throw Joe Biden under the bus. I'm sorry about his, the sickness, which seems kind of confusing to me. Not that he doesn't have it.
But it's at that stage.
It's at that stage.
Wow.
That's pretty shocking. That's a horrible thing. But when he was vice president, he goes over to Hollywood and he cuts a deal. And now Hollywood is just throwing gifts and everything to China. And they cut a really good deal, right? Mm-hmm. Then Katzenberg, he and DreamWorks, they invest billions of dollars. But what China did, they invited them in and they make you their partner.
Right.
And so to sum it up, is 85% of the movies today. So they stole the IP from Hollywood. They now make 85% of the movies now shown in China are Chinese made.
Right.
You talk about all the ass kissing, all the bribing, all the whatever.
Well,
the bottom line of the story is, don't ever do it. Don't ever let Joe Biden lead a deal.
Right.
Never mind lead your country.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
Didn't work out for Hollywood.
Definitely long term. I want to mention one story that I thought was interesting, or one was actually not interesting. It was just weird. When Tom Cotton mentions that Zuckerberg asked Xi Jinping if to name his daughter.
Okay, I forget. That's part of the book. Go ahead.
To
What?
name his daughter.
He
Like-
asked Xi Jinping
Yeah.
and what do you name her? Lily or something?
I don't know. I don't know if he actually did or if he took the name, but he asked him that. I was like, that's so weird.
You know what's funny?
I wouldn't ask you to do
No,
that.
of course. Me and you were in business for 20
Right.
years, and we started as a startup with no big, like, we went in and sold people a service, and we were professional and polite, and we might take them out to dinner and have fun with the drink or whatever. But this pathetic ass kissing of the corporate elites is so weird.
It's so weird.
It is so weird. That's why we would have never survived. We are so lucky we were able to be entrepreneurs because we would have been fired.
Yeah.
Plus, we weren't, we had some other issues.
Right.
Paying attention, listening.
So
We're
weird,
only
though,
kidding.
isn't it? Isn't that weird?
It's so weird.
It's like, maybe that's what happens when the world or the techs have so much, influence and power.
Yeah, but the Hollywood guys were over there
Yeah,
doing
them
it. The
too.
bankers were probably
Everyone. You're right. It's
like,
everyone.
I mean,
it's yeah.
I always say you take God and patriotism out of the equation in America of our business leaders and business people, and it all is about money. Money. And when you have so much more money, you can't even do enough. It's like a giant. It's like insatiable.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, guys, have a little respect for yourself. Name my daughter Xi Jinping. Yeah. Think of the Uyghurs who were freaking getting their organs removed.
Yeah.
Come on, it's crazy. Anyway, George covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Great having you here. I
Yeah.
loved it. Hey, I just want to let everyone know the show is supported by Big Sugar and the Big Sugar Foundation, making South Florida a great place to live, work, and love. Thanks for listening. We'll talk later.
Disclaimer. The host assumes no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.